Today is All Hallows Eve, a day of reflection, a day of contemplation. Today we are taking a look at the top 13 heroic deaths, the top 13 individuals who faced their own Kobayashi Maru test and were not found wanting. The Kobayashi Maru, it tests the no-win scenario. It tests one's willingness to do whatever it takes to survive and potentially eke out a victory, to potentially close shut the jaws of oblivion. For how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. Number 13. Captain Catherine Janeway was charged with the monumental task of leading her crew of 150 souls across an expanse of 70,000 light-years. She faced many powerful foes, but none more powerful than the Crynyd, a race of humanoids that mastered time itself. Through a year of hell, Captain Janeway was able to finally reach a position where she could destroy the Crynyd's time ship. Left with only one option, Janeway crashes the starship Voyager into the ship of time, sacrificing her life and her ship to stop the mad menace of Anarax, the leader of the Crynyd time ship contingent. She is so high on this list because, by destroying the time ship, she reset her year of hell and thus was once again alive. Number 12. Death of self is something we must all face. Dealing death to a foe is something far worse, for one must live with that choice forevermore. In the Star Wars Infinities comic for Episode 4, Jedi Grand Master Yoda was left with an impossible task: take down the corrupt and cruel Galactic Empire. He does finally reach the pivotal moment, and on the Death Star high above Imperial Center, Yoda makes an impossible choice: crash the Death Star into Coruscant and decapitate the Imperial government with one swift stroke. In an instant, he sacrifices his life, and sadly, the lives of the Coruscanti. But he is able to remove the Imperial boot from the neck of the galaxy. Number 11. It was the final battle of the rebellion, and the future of a freer galaxy was dawning. It was the Battle of Endor, the final titanic clash between the Galactic Empire and the Alliance to restore the Republic. Thousands were dying on each side, and it seemed that the Empire might turn the tide and close shut the jaws of rebel oblivion. One man, a nameless and faceless A-Wing pilot, made a choice. He chose to sacrifice his life to save the rebellion. He chose to fly his A-Wing into the heart of the Executor-class Star Dreadnought, and he chose to crash his starship right into the bridge, thus disabling the vessel and causing it to crash into the Death Star too. While others would live to get the glory, this one man faced his Kobayashi Maru and was not found wanting. Number 10. The outside context problem is always a considerable challenge to rectify. When a team of British soldiers were faced with the outside context problem of savage wolf-like bipeds that could infect humans with merely a bite, not one professional soldier was found wanting. Their leader, A1 Sergeant Wells, was bitten in the course of the hard-fought battle, and faced the loss of self due to the werewolf virus. Instead of succumbing, he performed one last act of heroism. He detonated some propane gas to not only give his last surviving squad member a fighting chance, he was also able to take out the wolf-like bipeds that had slaughtered his squad. He faced a no-win scenario and took a victory from the jaws of defeat. Number 9. When looking into the literal jaws of defeat, it is the strong man who can keep fighting regardless. Stacker Pentecost and Chuck Hansen's Kobayashi Maru came at the very end of a long and bitter war against large-scale aggressors nicknamed Kaiju. The final two Jaegers were dispatched to close a dimensional rift, but before they could even reach it, a gigantic Category 5 Kaiju emerged and fought both Jaegers to a standstill. The original plan was to detonate a nuke in the rift to close it. When it appeared that the Category 5 Kaiju was too strong to take down conventionally, Stacker Pentecost and Chuck Hansen chose to give their lives for humanity, and thus they detonated the nuke and killed the Category 5 Kaiju known as Slattern. By facing their Kobayashi Maru and passing it, they gave humanity a fighting chance. Number 8. Hell. contains horrors that can drive the strongest men mad. When the starship Event Horizon tested its gravity drive, the starship went to hell and came back changed. It came back possessed by an entity of hell. When it returned from the Immaterium, the vessel Lewis and Clark, commanded by Captain Miller, was dispatched to investigate. One by one, the ship killed Miller's crew, and later possessed the body of the starship's designer. In the final confrontation, Miller was able to maintain his sanity as the ship showed him image after image of hell. He was able to stop the vessel from dragging his last 2 crew members to the foul realm of darkness by detonating some charges meant to separate the bridge from engineering in case of an emergency. By sacrificing his life, he was able to give his final crew members a chance to live, and also ensure that humanity would be spared the depredations of chaos. Number 7. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. The mantra of the legendary Spock of Vulcan. He faced his Kobayashi Maru at the hands of the dread dictator Kahn Noonien Singh. Kahn was a 20th century dictator that was frozen in the 20th and thawed in the 23rd. After a decade of being marooned on a planet by Captain Kirk, Kahn and his followers were able to capture a starship and seek revenge. They were able to damage the starship Enterprise to the point where the warp drive remained offline. After the final confrontation, the Enterprise needs warp drive to escape an impending explosion. Spock gives his life by entering a chamber filled with radiation. He is able to fix the warp drive in time, but succumbs to radiation poisoning. Spock faced his Kobayashi Maru and ensured that while it was a no-win situation for him, it would not be for the starship Enterprise. Number 6. It was the middle of a war that had consumed the entire Star Wars galaxy. The Jedi were one of the only groups stemming the tide. The foul Xenos species known as the Yuuzhan Vong were masters of genosculpting, and thus they created a creature that was designed exclusively to hunt down Jedi. Teenaged Anakin Solo and a team of Jedi took it upon themselves to hunt down the Manufactorum producing these abominations. The battle was hard fought, and eventually even the mighty Anakin succumbed to the increasing waves of Xenos scum. But on the final day of his life, he reaped a bountiful harvest, and ensured that the Jedi would live and that the galaxy would once again have a chance to live free. Number 5. A professional soldier knows that death may come for him in the prosecution of his duties. For Peter Preston, nephew of the great Montgomery Scott, death came for him sooner rather than later. When the dread Lord Kahn attacked the Enterprise, he did so by striking where the Enterprise was weak. When others ran, Peter Preston stayed at his post and thus ensured that Captain Kirk had just enough power to hold off Kahn and live another day. Peter Preston faced his Kobayashi Maru early in life and did not shirk his duty. Number 4. The test of will that is the Kobayashi Maru can be solved in many ways. For Walt, he had to truly think outside the realm of traditional thinking. Towards the end of his life, Walt befriended a troubled youth and gave him a future. When the sister of his young friend was brutally and viciously attacked, Walt chose to fight in a way that would ensure that his young friends would not face death themselves, and thus he confronted the gang responsible for the attack. Instead of engaging them in combat, he sacrifices his life by allowing them to shoot him, thus ensuring that the gang will face considerable legal repercussions for their actions. When faced with certain death, Walt willingly took his Kobayashi Maru and was never once found wanting. Number 3. Curt Reynolds faced many impossible challenges, and in an instant he was forced to take his Kobayashi Maru. Curt Reynolds was a rebel with a domineering and dictatorial father. He chooses the path of the exile and leaves with his true love, only to be involved in an accident that leaves his love dead. Distraught, he uses a technologically advanced chemical to raise her from the dead. Sadly, the chemical reanimates her only as a shadow of her former self. Throughout their misadventures, her mind continues to degrade and her savage zombie side comes to the fore. In the end, both meet their final fates together by immolating themselves in a furnace, not only to end the pain of his love, but also to ensure that humanity is not threatened by a zombie apocalypse. Number 2. The midnight black beast that is the Xenomorph is a vicious and canny foe that has laid low numerous Yautja and human alike. It was on the Acheron colony that humanity got its second taste of the Xenomorph. Sadly, the colonists stood absolutely no chance. Upon their last stand, Newt's brother stood in defense of his mother and his sister and his species, and lo did he strike true and strike with precision against the foul xenomorph, shooting one with a stub gun. Alas, he was immediately killed by the resultant acid splash, but his sacrifice ensured that his sister would live to fight another day. Only in death does duty end. And finally, number 1. The might of John Wayne is well known. He faced many foes throughout his long career, only to be brought low by the most insidious foe of all, cancer. And so in his final film, he portrays, ironically enough, an aging gunfighter named J.B. Books, who despite having laid low numerous gunfighters, is himself dying from cancer. In real life, John Wayne's cancer was actually in remission. Books puts his life in order throughout the film and acts as a mentor to a very young Ron Howard. In the end, he gathers several rough gunfighters that expressed a desire to test their mettle against him. The battle is arduous, but JB emerges triumphant. However, the bartender of the saloon wherein the battle took place cowardly shoots JB in the back. The young Ron Howard lays low the coward, but before he can take up the path of violence, he is warned from it by the dying J.B. Books. In the end, we must all face our Kobayashi Maru, and J.B. Books faced it with dignity and grace. And now, I must take my leave, and leave you all to contemplate your own lives. And may we